I invite you to enter into a spirit of meditation and quiet in our spirits as we share these opening words. Into this home, we bring our hunger for awakening. We bring compassionate hearts and a will toward justice. Into this home, we bring the courage to walk on after hard losses. Into this home, we bring our joy and gratitude for ordinary blessings. By our gathering, we bless this place. In its shelter, we know ourselves blessed. As you may know, Danny is an attorney, actually a famous one, involved in the Karen Silkwood case, Wounded Knee, and many others, and currently is working with the Lakota People's Law Project, and today is going to share some spiritual reflections on a life of that brings together social justice and deep spirituality. So please join me in welcoming Danny Sheehan.
Good morning. When Karen asked me a couple of months ago whether I'd be willing to come and talk with everybody and have the opportunity, I said absolutely. And she said, what would you like to talk about? And I said, of course, we'll talk to some extent about the joint operation of all of us working to help the water protectors, both through their spiritual confrontation with the power of the state and with their trials that are still going on, as you know. But I said, in addition to that, I wanted to speak a little more broadly about the common mission that the Unitarian Universalist Association has with the newer manifestations of the Catholic Christian Church, and specifically with the Jesuit Order. In one of my many previous incarnations, I spent a full decade being legal counsel to the United States Jesuit headquarters in Washington, D.C., and a co-director of their National Social Ministry Office. And it was there that I realized that there had been this, and was there during the beginning of this process, of a major transformation that was going on inside the Society of Jesus, the largest single order of the Catholic Church, that had been transforming from a period, a dark period in the church, when it was dedicated to the enforcement of dogma and many of the activities that had caused so many people in the Catholic Church to decide that they had to go elsewhere, looking for more genuine spirituality rather than being coerced and threatened and told that if they didn't obey certain dogmas that they would end up going to hell or some other terrible thing like being excommunicated. That when I was with the Jesuits, I came to understand that there was in fact a common understanding that we share with the Unitarians. The Unitarian Universalists were there in Washington, D.C., and Bob Alpern was the head of their National Social Ministry Office, and we recognized that each and every time the Society of Jesus would come forward with a new and more progressive position that we were advocating inside the Catholic Church and advocating this to the Catholic Conference of Bishops, etc., that it was always the Unitarian Universalists that were first to come forward to acknowledge that they had already come to this position and that they were glad to have the Jesuits aboard. What I want to focus on just in the short few minutes that we have here together this morning three very important principles that I had come to realize that we share in common, which are extremely important. You may have feared in knowing that there was a Jesuit scholastic coming to talk with you, that I might be spending a lot of time talking about the difference between Trinitarianism and Unitarianism, or the relationship between Unitarianism and Universalism, or even perhaps talking a lot about the comparative history of the Unitarian Universalist Association as related to the church and the Christian community. But fear not, that's not what I'm here today to do. Besides, we don't have enough time to address any one of those issues. But what I want to do is I want to raise three, I think, fairly profound and important principles that we do agree upon. And the first of them is we have a common faith in the Jesuit Order, the Society of Jesus, and the Unitarian Universalist Association, with the existence of an infinite and eternal sea of completely undifferentiated consciousness as the ultimate source of the material universe that we find ourselves incarnated in. Now, this common faith distinguishes us from a number of other communities in the world who believe that the material universe is simply material, that whether it's a subtle form of energy or a more dense form of mass, that everything that exists is strictly material, and that has generated a belief in radical materialism that has actually degenerated into an entire philosophy of postmodernism. That in fact any type of belief in a transcendent dimension of reality is nothing more than a fiction on the part of those of us who believe in the existence of such an infinite and eternal sea of consciousness as the actual source of our material existence. Now, this may sound a little esoteric, but that's only because it is. This, of course, immediately raises the issue of, people may not think about it, the issue of emanationism, which seems like a little esoteric concept, but the concept is that our material universe emanates, coming from the emanare, means to issue forth from, to flow up out of, this infinite and eternal, otherwise completely undifferentiated sea of consciousness. And this is a major issue that has gone on in discussions in the human family for millennia, actually, of how it is that our material existence has manifested out of this, either from nothing entirely, or from some type of a sea of consciousness. Now, this is extremely important because there are two existent major schools of thought within even this part of the community, and that is it opens up on the second issue that I want to talk about here today quickly, is that is a faith that each of us as human beings possesses a faculty which is analogous to seeing or hearing or tasting or smelling. It is a faculty that is able to immediately and experientially discern a unitive phenomenon which bonds all of us together in a form of unity that enables all of us to share in the experience of other beings. Now, again, this sounds a little esoteric, but the fact of the matter is that the two schools of thought that I want to just raise, and this is just for raising issues for us to reflect upon during the week before we gather together again next week. And that is that this experience, some people believe that we have a latent faculty that is able to directly and immediately and experientially encounter a unitive phenomenon that exists only within the parameters of the physical universe. That there is a bonding attraction between every single ultimately irreducible integer of matter in the universe that attracts everyone to every other one. We now know that the degree of attraction is inversely proportional to the square of the distance between each of the units, but that this bonding phenomenon generates a unified field. There are books being written about this a lot now, about the field, and that there's this numinous field that we can directly gain access to, which enables us to determine whether particular conduct on the part of individual human beings or our collective community is either harmonious with or disharmonious to the natural order of things. And this is that whole discussion of pantheism, and that there is this earth-centered faith. There is a sharing of actual material reality with the water and with the air and with the earth, and that this is a radical monist belief that there is in fact a referent, an experiential, subtle referent that each of us has access to, which is able to enable us to discern whether our conduct is harmonious with or disharmonious to this vibrational frequency. But there is a distinct order of faith that actually believes that there is an additional faculty that we have as human beings, which is able to actually access the infinite and eternal sea of undifferentiated consciousness out of which this material realm flowed. And this is the realm of theology. This is the belief that there is actually a realm of unity that transcends the simply material universe. Now, these are two extremely important premises of both the Society of Jesus and the Unitarian Universalist Association, and the belief in the existence of this infinite and eternal sea of consciousness that is actually conscious, that has a subjective identity, actually, of which we are all a reflection. So the reason that I raise these two fundamental issues is because they give rise to a common belief that we have, both in the Society of Jesus and the Unitarian Universalist Association, that the access to this experience actually enables us to discern a unity of all being that enables us to, in fact, motivates us to have a compassion and sympathy for all other living beings, that it actually translates into conduct on our part. It causes people with this type of faith to have a different type of experience to which they can refer when confronted by the various temptations of the world, the temptations toward hatred, the temptations toward domination and control, that there is an actual experience of unity to which one has access, that from which one can respond to these types of temptations in a different way. And this is the common faith that we have between the two societies, the Association of the Universal Unitarianism and the Jesuit Order. What I wanted to do just in the few remaining moments that I have, I want to share with you the good news that the Catholic Christian Church, and more specifically, the largest single order in the Catholic Church, which is the largest single denomination in the entire Christian community on the planet, has actually embarked upon a very new and progressive era. Now, many of you obviously know about Francis, Pope Francis, who is the first Jesuit in the entire history of the Catholic Church ever to become Pope. And you've recognized that he is engaged in certain type of activity, which is causing a great deal of consternation inside the Catholic hierarchy at the Vatican, that he is viewed as being dramatically more progressive than gives them comfort. And it turns out that the new head of the Jesuit Order that has come on as of 2016, Arturo Soso, is just as progressive as Pope Francis is. And that they have been promulgating a series of statements that are extremely important for all of us to understand, that they relate not only to the issue of global climate change, as you've probably heard, that Pope Francis has issued an entire encyclical called In Care of Our Common Home. And he has been accused of being almost pantheistic in his endorsement of the spiritual value of the earth and the air and the water of our world and other life forms, other living forms on our planet. And the new head of the Jesuit Order has been accused of being a virtual out-and-out democratic socialist. This is all part of the good news that I'm sharing with you here today. There are a number of extraordinarily important statements that each of them have made in the recent past that I wanted to just share with you briefly so that you'll know the extent of the good news. That, for example, in his papal exhortation, Pope Francis, right after having been elected as the Pope, he issued a major papal statement in which he said, in part, the teachings of faith concerning contingent situations are subject to ever more further development and must be open to discussion. Yet we cannot help but be concrete without presuming to enter into particular details, lest the great social principles remain mere generalities which challenge no one. There is a need to draw practical operating conclusions so they will have greater impact on the actual current situations. The patrons of the faith, taking into account the contributions of different scientists, have the right, indeed the duty, to provide opinions on all that affects people's lives, because the task of evangelization, that is bringing the good news to the people, necessarily implies, indeed demands, the integral promotion of each individual human being. It is therefore no longer possible to claim that religious faith should be restricted exclusively to the private realm, and that it exists only to prepare souls for heaven. We know that God wants his children to be happy too in this world, even though we are called to fulfillment in eternity. For he has created all things for our own enjoyment and the enjoyment of everyone. Here I direct my attention, he says, to two great issues, the economy and the distribution of income. He says, the need to resolve the structural causes of poverty and injustice cannot be delayed any longer. This is not only for the pragmatic reason of the urgency of this issue for the good order of society, but because our human society needs to be cured of the sickness of global capitalism. He says that welfare projects which meet certain immediate needs must be considered to be merely temporary responses. For so long as the problem of the poor are not radically resolved by expressly rejecting the absolute authority of the market forces and financial speculation, by attacking the structural causes of this inequality, no solution will be found for our world's problems. Now, this is a stunning and shocking position for the Catholic Church to have taken, because it has struck a blow which the Jesuit Order has been pronouncing for many decades now, since the arrival of Pedro Arrupe, who was the Superior General of the Jesuits in 1962. He was chosen. He was an ardent anti-fascist. He was a medical doctor, a surgeon in Spain, who, when he became a Jesuit priest, began denouncing from the pulpit in Catholic services the fascist regime of Franco and Hitler and Mussolini. And he was ordered to be assassinated, actually, by Mussolini. And he ended up, interestingly enough, one of the three people that was assigned to assassinate him felt so bad about this that he went to confession. And it sounds like a joke coming, but it's not. But he actually went to confession, and he said, "I feel terrible because I've been ordered to assassinate this priest." And the priest asked him, "Who is this?" And he said, "It's this Pedro Arrupe." And so he went to his bishop, and his bishop contacted the provincial, and they took Pedro Arrupe out of Spain and hid him out in a Buddhist monastery. And at the Buddhist monastery, he began looking into Buddhism, began meditating in the Buddhist tradition, and it turns out that this Buddhist monastery was in Hiroshima. And so on August 6th of 1945, when the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Pedro Arrupe was outside of the city up in the mountains, and it blew down the monastery. And I was there when he was having this conversation with us at the Jesuit headquarters. He said that when he awoke, he looked up, and the first thing he saw was the clock on the wall that had stopped. And he said that he realized that we had crossed into the end times. And he said that unless we radically moved to eliminate the structural sources of the injustice that had been generated on our planet to cause our human family to divide ourselves into these camps, and to arm ourselves with these dreadful weapons, that we would end the great human experiment, the evolution of our consciousness. And so he dedicated himself to stopping this. And it's a long story, more time than we have this morning for, but he ultimately was chosen to be the Superior General of the Society of Jesus. It was under him that I served when I was there at Jesuit headquarters. And we together discerned with the Unitarian Universalist Society, with the Quaker people, with the heads of all 54 of the other major religious denominations in the United States, including the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, a certain set of policies that we proposed and began to be adopted by the faith communities around the country. And they ended up including the need to disassemble the structural sources of injustice, including the international corporate capitalist order, and of course authoritarian communism that was dedicatedly atheistic and diminishing of human rights and individual value. And we set forth on that path, and have been on that path since that time. And so I wanted to share with you one final set of observations on the part of Francis. And this was in his actual encyclical on global climate change, in which he asserted that we have to pay attention to the value of the indigenous people in protecting our world. He stated that, and I'll find this particular quote. He said, basically says that one of the most fundamental aspects of justice on our planet is if there's going to be any type of business undertaking or venture that interferes in any way with the lands of the indigenous people, that the indigenous people have to be consulted, and it requires their prior consent to any such project prior to the beginning of the project, and that the project cannot be decided upon and then undertaken and then contacting the indigenous people only after that. And that he goes on at some length in the quote, and you would almost believe that he was talking about the issue that we confront here, of the pipeline here in North Dakota. He said that I have come to identify ways of giving greater economic empowerment to indigenous people. I believe that the central issue is how to reconcile the right of development, both social and cultural, with the protection of the particular characteristics of indigenous peoples and their territory. This is especially clear when planning economic activities which may interfere with indigenous culture and their ancestral relationship to the earth and their water. In this regard, the right to prior and fully informed consent must always prevail, as foreseen in Article 32 of the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. Only then will it be possible to guarantee peaceful cooperation between the governing authorities and the indigenous people, overcoming potential confrontation and conflict. This is a call from the largest denomination of the Christian community in the world for an insight on the part of our people. I bring that to you as good news just so that we'll understand that there is an important degree of unity among the values of the Unitarian Universalist Association. You may sometimes feel a bit isolated here in your efforts to try to call attention to the rest of the people in the community to these essential values. But the bottom line is that there has been this major sea change that has occurred and is in the process of occurring within the Catholic Church and within the Jesuit Order that is rising up to meet you in this quest that you have for social justice. And so therefore I'm delighted to be here each Sunday when I'm here. When I'm not, I'm somewhere else, usually in a Catholic Mass, somewhere else in our country. But I'm here today, and I want to just share with you this good news. Great, thank you.
Deep peace of the running wave to you. Deep peace of the flowing air to you. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the shining stars to you. Deep peace of the infinite peace to you.